Hello everyone, this is Jotto, and welcome to another deck tech. This is a special one. This time we're doing NR Hyper Aggro, the strongest deck in the game. I'm not convinced it's really that close, but I don't know, people have had mixed results on it to some extent, but at least from my perspective, this is the strongest deck in the game. This was the deck that I made up to 1800 points with, which for anyone that plays ladder on a regular knows is actually insane. 1700 is usually the highest ladder goes, but, well, if you have a high enough win rate, you actually can go that high. And at least with this deck, I've been averaging around 92%, I think. So, extremely high win rate capability. So, what is this? Why do we call it Hyper Aggro? Well, basically, it's an NR deck. However, Nature Rage usually, traditionally, plays Chimera, an extremely powerful 4 mana 3 level card, but it requires 3 levels. However, turns out Nature Rage has enough power in it, you really don't need Chimera. And the speed and consistency drop you get from playing it, turns out just makes the deck worse, which is interesting. But anyway, let's get into the actual deck. Basic Neva. So, 1 mana, 4 turn cooldown. All creatures you play this turn are swift until end of turn. This is a huge deal because a huge number of creatures in this deck benefit from swift, but it can also be used with some weird play mechanics and as removal, which sometimes comes up. However, usually this is used as player removal instead of creature removal. So yes, very, very powerful. You can get massive, massive damage turns out of Basic Neva in this deck. Call of Yalaya. Now, Call of Yalaya is the glue that holds this whole deck together. So 1 mana, spell, search your deck for a nature creature that costs 2 or less and put it in your hand. Then you shuffle the call back, which is actually kind of useful because it means you get them late. Almost the entire deck is searchable by call. In fact, if we look through the whole deck, there is only, 2 creatures that can't be searched in Ogre Captive or Merchant, but everything else can be. This also allows for a little bit of Call of Yalaya toolboxing, where you play 1 OVs or 2 OVs in your deck and then you call for them. It does mean that previous versions of this deck actually did play 1 OVs of certain nature cards because, well, call can get them. However, current version decided to bump up those numbers to 2 to get a bit of consistency, which for anyone that knows anything about my deck building is not surprised. I'm not a big fan of 1 OVs in general. The only time I tend to play 1 OVs is when they're the 5th copy of something. Where you wanted more than 4 copies of something, so you play another one that does a similar role. That's pretty much the only time I use 1 OVs. But anyway, let's get the spells out of the way before we get into the massive creature suite. Amber Strike, very, very basic instant for nature, +2/+2 until end of turn. This can be used for burst, although it's usually used as a combat trick to defend your own creatures. Can be quite nice, and also has some synergy with Primal Battle, although it's probably the worst card in the deck. Yeah, it's probably the worst card in the deck, but it does have a very, very good role, and when it's good, it saves you games. So Amber Strike has remained in this deck. Tidal Wave, 1 mana, 2 level spell that is apparently a wolf spirit. Is that? That's a visual bug right there. We've got a wolf spirit tidal wave for anyone that sees that. Huh. Found a bug report on a video. But anyway, move an enemy creature from the front line to the support line and vice versa. Draw a card. Now, drawing a card is big because it lets you maintain something I like to call velocity, which is tempo and card advantage, where you gain tempo but then you don't lose anything. How do you gain tempo? Well, you usually have some pretty big creatures and usually have board control. Tidal Wave lets you move their play back so that they can't block, and it also lets you pull flyers forward and kill them. So it's essentially a removal spell. It's a very, very useful spell, and the fact that it draws a card is amazing. Now, the last sort of removal spell we're playing is Primal Battle. There is Wilderness Guardian is technically a spell, but Primal Battle, 1 mana, 2 level, Ancient, which sometimes comes up, being able to use it as a shrine. Choose an enemy creature and ally creature, they fight each other. This deck has a lot of 4/4s, which means Primal Battle essentially deletes things. It kills almost everything in the game on those creatures for very cheap, and importantly, it gets rid of Selena, which is a big deal. This deck actually, if you play correctly, doesn't have any issues dealing with Selena whatsoever. The main thing you have to keep in mind is holding on to a 4/4 creature in hand before they play Selena. So you hold on to it, they play Selena, they use the ability, you play your 4/4 Primal Battle, just kill it. You lose no creatures because there isn't a single creature in this deck that dies to Selena. And you play another creature as you would have, and then Primal Battle. So you trade 3 mana and 3 levels, so it's actually 4 mana because you're not going 3 levels in this deck, so you have an extra mana. For, 1 for 1. 1 for 1, 1 mana, and you still keep going on the turn. It's actually a ridiculously good answer to that card. Now, on to the creature suite. Vast amounts of nature 2 costs here. We've got the 3/4 split of Elf Warrior and Silverfang. They're both 2/2, 3 speed for this 2 mana cost 1 level sort of lineup. The reason for the 3/4 split, which I use in a lot of decks, is Silverfang is a better card than Elf Warrior in most situations. The fact that it's a spirit is a downside in some, but it gains deadly against creatures of evil, which helps in the mirror, weirdly. But anyway, it gains deadly against evil creatures, so Rage, Corruption, or Dominion creatures. But it's legendary, so you don't want to draw 2, and that is why you play 4 Elf Warrior, 3 Fang, because you want the 7, and you don't want to draw 2 Fang. That's basically what that's about. You want 7, so you almost always get 1 on turn 2. Very, very simple, early good stats. Deathtrap. Deathtrap is what this deck is largely built around. Deathtrap and Merchant, I would say. It is arguably the best card in the deck. I would say that there are okay, interrupted by I think it was the police. But anyway, so there are 4 cards in this deck that you could consider the best card in the deck. There is Jungle Deathtrap, there is Merchant of Souls, Wilderness Guardian, and Call of Yalaya, because Call of Yalaya boosts the consistency of Deathtrap, which makes the card better. So what does the trap actually do? So it's a 2 cost, 4/4, 1 speed. Ooh, that's big stats. So what's the downside? When 1 or more enemy creatures with level 2 or less enter the field, Deathtrap sees it, eats it, and then dies. So they trade, basically. That's what happens. So they play a 2 cost, you play a 2 cost, trade, everyone goes home, right? Well, the thing is, if you have 2 of them, only the first one will die, then the second one will die, to the next creature. The other thing this allows for is 1 for 1 playing in a Nature Rage deck, which is pretty good. And if you can recur them, well, now we're off to the horses. However, chances are they will run out of creatures before you run out of traps. And that's what makes Deathtrap really sick, because it's a 4/4, which works with Primal Battle, remember? So it works with Primal Battle, which is a big, big, big deal as a 4/4 Primal target. Call of Yalaya lets you search for Deathtraps, which means you effectively have 7 in the deck, if you think about it. So that's in and of itself a boost. Then you play multiple. But you're going to run out of traps, right? And also, this is a 4/4 that can be swifted with the hero, keep in mind. Well, that's where Merchant comes in. And we're just going to jump down to Merchant for this. So, Merchant of Souls is a 3 cost, 2 level creature, 3/3, 2 speed with Tainted, which means if you don't have 3 levels in evil, you lose 3 life when it enters play. When you lose life or dealt damage for the first time each turn, gain 2 energy. And for 1 mana, you can play a non-spirit creature with level 2 or less from your graveyard using energy. Deathtrap costs 2. So, for 4 mana, you can play Merchant of Souls, pay 1, get a trap. And then, they now have to deal with a Merchant of Souls and a trap. This deck is very good at triggering its own merchants. So they have to kill the Merchant of Souls, but then the trap stays in play and hits them. This is the catch. Now, if you have 5 mana, Merchant of Souls Trap is also a 7 damage Swift combo on 1 card. And that's, like, Merchant is what this deck is building up to. And I would say Trap, Merchant, and Guardian. That is the Trap lock. Now, Guardian is a 3 mana 2-level card. Really? But anyway, Guardian is a 3 mana 2-level card, 4/5, 2 speed, Invocation. It's legendary, so you can only have 1. And it's unstoppable and ancient. Now, the fact that it's ancient means there's technically 7 ancient cards in this deck, which means 16 shrines is viable. That's all I'm going to say on that. Whenever a non-summoned rage or nature creature enters the field under your control, it gains an energy. For 2 energy, you can ping something. And for 4 energy, you can invoke it and deal 2 damage to all enemy creatures. Now, at first glance, the invoke ability is what you want this for. And I would agree. In most situations, the invoke ability is the crazy, crazy powerhouse. You play Guardian, you lose a bit of tempo, you paid 3 mana to do nothing. They pay, I mean, if they remove it, aside from Unicorn, it's usually just a 1-for-1 and no tempo loss, like in the case of Ray, and Bark Convoy is not too bad. But Unicorn's kind of brutal. But the other 2 options that are common, not much of an issue. However, if they just play a bunch of creatures, you can play some more stuff. It's not impossible to activate it in 1 turn, although it's very hard. And generally, when Guardian gets invoked, you win the board state. And you usually win the game as well. So Guardian is a mega threat. If you can't remove it, you're pretty much dead in most situations. However, just being a 4/5 with that invoke ability, effectively a 4/5 Swift that deals 2 damage, wouldn't be mega insane in this deck. It would be very good. Very, very good. But what pushes this over the top is the fact that you can damage yourself with Guardian. So the combo is you get a Guardian down. Next turn, say you had a trap in graveyard. Next turn, you've got Guardian down. You play Merchant of Souls. Use the ability, get your death trap back. You now have a Guardian, a Merchant, and a trap in play. If they kill the Merchant, that breaks the loop. If they play a creature into the death trap, keep in mind they're going to take a lot of damage if they don't. If they play a creature into the death trap, the trap will die. You then use the 2 energy on Guardian to ping yourself on their turn, giving Merchant of Souls 2 more energy, which on your turn you spend to resurrect the trap, giving you 1 more energy. Which you can then just play another creature. This deck is full of creatures. You get 2 energy. Ping yourself, Merchant of Souls gets 2. You get the idea. It's a loop. So if you can't disrupt that loop against this deck, you are dead. That is the trap lock loop. And it's not that hard to set up. It requires a curve of Guardian into Merchant. But if they play Guardian, you don't have spell removal. It's too late to deal with the loop once it happens. Because you can remove the Merchant. Think about this. You can remove the Merchant, but then they still have 2 energy on their Wilderness Guardian. So then they play 2 creatures, invoke it, and attack for 8 because there's still a trap in play. You can remove the trap, but that puts you in the lock. You can remove the Guardian, but then they still have a trap and Merchant, which is 7 damage. The only viable responses to this, once it's happened, are things like Unicorn, because that kills the trap, and the Guardian, and then maybe another creature. That's pretty much all you can do. It's really hard. If they get Guardian down and you don't have a response to it, right then, you might just be dead. And that's one of the reasons why this deck is so powerful. The interaction between Trap, Merchant, and Guardian is ludicrously strong. It's incredibly powerful, and in a lot of matchups, if you play just to set up that combo, you're going to win. Because if they're not playing Nature, if they are playing Nature, Unicorn will ruin you. But if they're not playing Nature, it's very hard to deal with this setup. I mean, think about it. Rage control decks can't really do much. Order Rage is an interesting one. They have Ray of Righteousness for Guardian. But that's a 1-for-1, 3 mana for 3 mana trade. That's not a plus. That's just a trade. That's the thing. It sounds like a counter, but it's not. You're just trading cards. And that's the main thing about it. Bark Convoy costs one too many mana to actually get down early enough, unless you're playing Kayanu, but Kayanu gets death trapped beyond belief. Death Trap counters Kayanu in a massive way. But if you don't have that counter to that Guardian, the game might just be over. And that's why you play 3 Guardian. At first I was playing 2, now I'm up to 3. 4 I think is too much, but Guardian is actually just amazing. And this combo is the crazy thing. So now that we talked about that, let's actually finish out this deck tech, shall we? So, what's the rest of the nature engine? So we've got Summoner Druid. Summoner Druid is a 2 mana, 2 level, 1/2 speed support with 2 energy. You can spend 1 energy and exhaust it. Second creature you play this turn costs 2 less. Now, Summoner Druid allows for some cool combos of Merchant because you can still pay 1 mana, but actually reduces the energy cost on Merchant, which is kind of nice late game. However, Summoner is largely used to get early speed and early starts, and also to help activate the Ogre, which we'll get to later, which is one of the other reasons this deck is good. But besides that, it does allow you to get down some nice Swift combos. There is some stuff to keep in mind about this. Summoner Druid only works on the second card you play, which means Brother-in-Arms counts as the first and second card you play if you play it. So what you want to do with Brother-in-Arms, which we'll get to in a bit, is you want to play another 2-drop, then play Brother-in-Arms using the energy of the Summoner Druid to get your value. That's what you want to do. So, powerful card. You play 4 because you want 1 early, but I mean, sometimes you call a Yalaya for it. Call a Yalaya is nice on turn 1 because you get to look at your hand and then figure out, okay, what do I need? And Summoner Druid is really nice as kind of an option there. But often you want to be calling for other stuff, and Summoner Druid is just incidentally in your hand because you're playing 4. Brother-in-Arms, 2 mana, 2 level, 2/2, 2 speed. When you play Brother-in-Arms from hand, you put a copy from your deck into play. Well, more accurately, you play it. Now, that results in anti-synergy with Summoner Druid, and massive synergy with the hero power, because it means both of them are played, so they can both get Swift. Now, when one of them dies, they both die. That's the downside, and that's why you only play 2. It does activate Ogre on its own, which is super important, and it's nice with the hero power, but you need 2 in the deck because they search each other, but you don't want it every game. You don't want it every game all the time. It can be nice, and you can call for it if you need it for that situation. It's also an extra energy on Wilderness Guardian, so it has its place in this deck. It's quite useful. It's also one of the only efficient ways of dealing with Death Trap. Because the first brother comes in, kills Trap, the second brother still comes in. That's how it works, because they play in order. There's one other card that does this, which is Eternal Servants, and Eternal Servants is the other kind of counter to Death Trap. Although I think Brother-in-Arms is a better counter because Eternal Servants are 1/1s, which means they just get killed for free by the other nature 2-drops, whereas Brother-in-Arms is a 2/2, which forces them to actually do something. So Brother-in-Arms is a really nice counter to Death Trap. Elvish Champion, 2 mana, 2 levels. I think everything else in the deck is 2 mana, 2 levels actually. 2/3, 2 speed, 2 play boost abilities. If you control 3 other creatures, Swift. If they control 3 creatures, My Emblem. Some situations, it's a Swift 3/4, which is crazy, but that doesn't always happen. Play Boost does work with Merchant, by the way, because it's played. The My Emblem is the real reason it's in this deck, although the fact that you can tutor for a Swift target with Call of Yalaya is amazing, but the My Emblem really helps against soldiers. And Basic Alexa is a walking counter to the Death Trap plan. You can play in a way that actually beats Alexa using Death Trap. You just have to play very carefully and bait the hero power out. But Elvish Champion, and also you can use it to nullify guards, which is kind of hilarious. But Elvish Champion is the counter to soldiers, because a lot of their stuff is 3/3, 2 speed, and it means they have to start throwing stuff on top of their guys with My Emblems, and if they're using buffs, they're not playing creatures, and that's where they're going to lose to things like Trap. So Elvish Champion is very nice counter, and you can call for it. I was playing 1 in the original list, but I think 2 is where it's at right now. Unicorn. Unicorn, 2/2, 3 speed, enter field, destroy a spell. You play 2 because sometimes you actually want to, and the fact that you can merchant it is amazing. It gives this deck so much spell removal, lets you deal with Tombs of the Damned, it lets you deal with Haunt, which is really annoying on a Guardian, although not as annoying as you'd expect because Invoke clears all of them. It lets you deal with Vampirism, other Guardians, this is super important, and a few other annoying spells. It also, I think, pushes over the top over OR because Unicorn, well, it kills all of their angels, which means it takes away one of their anti-aggro plans later on in the game. So Unicorn just feeds off all of their angels, and they also have major issues dealing with deathtraps. You can actually 1-for-1 an OR deck into the ground sometimes, which is something that a lot of decks can't do. But anyway, so Unicorn, very, very nice. Now, is that the last card in the deck? Yeah, the last card in the deck is the Ogre Captive, which has one of my favorite flavor texts in the whole game. Give Ronnie's best friend. So, Ogre Captive is a 2 mana, 2 level, 4/4, 2 speed, but he's a slave, and he counts as 2 slave creatures. As long as the captive is damaged, it is unstoppable. This is text that I forget exists. It barely ever comes up. It does come up if you primal battle before combat, but nah, that almost never comes up. There are 3 in the deck because getting 2 of them to attack is almost impossible. You need 4 other creatures. Yeah, this thing is effectively legendary, so there are 3 in the deck because it is a slave that counts as 2 slaves, which is very hard to get going. But getting 1 going isn't that difficult. You've got Brother-in-Arms, that does it. Summoner Druid will do it. Sometimes you just leave it in play, and if you can't attack with it, well, it doesn't really matter. They still have to deal with everything else, and it's an amazing primal battle target. It's also a very nice Merchant of Souls target if you're playing in a way where you actually want to gain board control instead of trap blocking, which does happen, by the way. Sometimes you need that board control instead, and it's just a very solid card. I would say that NR is the best Ogre Captive deck in the game, I think, because it doesn't just activate Ogre Captive nicely, it doesn't just have a hero power that works with Ogre Captive, but it also benefits it in a lot of ways. Wilderness Guardian counts as a creature when you invoke it, which makes it easier to activate the Ogre. Primal Battles in this deck, which is very nice. Battle Ritual Grounds, the Shrine is very good with it. Ambush Strike and Ogre Captive makes it basically impossible to kill in combat, because 6/6 is basically as large as stuff gets in Spellweaver. And the rest of the deck is 3-speed support, which is nice. And the fact that a lot of the other creatures are not easy to remove, like in the case of Deathtrap, means you can actually just keep attacking with the Ogre Captive. So Ogre Captive, very, very good in this deck. I think originally Ogre Captive was the poster child of this type of deck, although nowadays it really is Guardian or Deathtrap or even Merchant. But Ogre Captive, very solid. Now, in terms of shrine counts, I've worked on this shrine count a lot. We'll go to the other deck builder so you can see the numbers. 7 nature, 4 rage, 4 battle ritual grounds, and a valley. So 16 shrines because there are 7 ancients, which means you can reliably play 16 shrines. Battle Ritual Grounds is an amazing, amazing shrine for this deck. So level conversion almost never comes up. Sometimes it does, but almost never comes up. The main reason that this is in the deck is it provides consistency on your color, which is incredibly useful. The added consistency bumps the win rate up by a significant margin. And its ability sometimes comes up. You can pay 2 mana to give something either reach, so it can attack support line, or ranged. I use ranged more, but they're both handy, and sometimes you don't have a play and you'd rather just use your Ritual Grounds to snipe stuff in the back row. So Ritual Grounds is actually pretty solid. I really like this shrine, and the fact that it's a 2-color shrine is what bumps this deck up consistency-wise, which is super important because it lowers the number of games you get color screwed, which is the downside of aggressive 2-color decks. Rest of the shrine count, 7 nature, because you need to start with nature on turn 1 because of Call. And 4 rage. Now this gives you 8 rage sources effectively, which is more than enough. Generally you only have access to 7, sometimes 6, so 8 is more than enough. and 11 nature sources is kind of overkill, to be honest. But this guarantees more or less that you're going to get that turn 1 nature, turn 3 rage. That's what you need. Unless you're going second, sometimes going second you need both on turn 2. Although this is a deck that generally goes double 2-drop on going second. You can also have a Call of Yalaya into Summoner Druid start, or Call of Yalaya into Ogre Captive into, well, Brother in Arms or something like that. It does happen, but generally you don't need Rage until turn 3. Now, in my opinion, this list is quite optimized. I've played a lot of games with NR. I think I'm on 50 or something. But anyway, so I've played a lot of games with NR on this patch, and I very much like this list. I can go over some stuff which I've tried before. More copies of Amber Strike I'm not a big fan of. I think 2 is more than enough. Pretty much anything with 1 health I don't like. I think that once you start playing stuff like Elf Scout, you're not playing a 1-for-1 style anymore. You're just trying to outspeed them. And I think lowering the power level of each card is a genuine downside. This is a very proactive deck. It can't afford to respond to things, but it also is not the fastest deck in the game. It really, really peaks kind of turn 4 or 5. Not in those super early turns. Garko Shaman's interesting. I am debating trying this out as a call target where you play 1 Garko in the deck, just because it might be useful in some situations. Tornado Outbreak, I didn't want to lower the threat density in this deck, so the bounce option I actually did try instead was the Storm Fairy. Now, Storm Fairy I did try for a while, 4 mana, 2 levels, 2/3, 2 speed, and you get to bounce a creature. The reason I cut it was because I wanted added consistency early, and I kind of realized that Phoenix wasn't as much of an issue as I thought it was. That's essentially what that was about. I wanted added consistency, the second champion was nice, and the third guardian was really good at dealing with a lot of stuff. The golden rule of NR is don't be reactive. Be proactive. If you are not setting the pace of the game, you're losing. So you want to set the pace of the game, and that's why I'm not playing... I mean, Storm Fairy was good for tempo, but that's why I'm not bothering with any rage removal spells, or cleanse, or power shot, or like, well, fire blast, fireball, nothing. Basically, it has to be proactive to the game plan. Same goes for Marked by Gods. Fate's Touch, you could debate, but I think in terms of removal, Primal Battle is enough. Primal Battle Tidal Wave is enough because, keep in mind, you have access to Wilderness Guardian, you have access to Deathtrap that stops most threats before they even start, and you're playing an aggro deck. They're going to have to block. So it's not exactly as if they can just race you. But anyway, so that's my take on NR. In my opinion, the best deck in the game right now. I have been informed by various people that this deck is not as easy to play as I thought, and this is a case of me just playing a deck a lot, so you get a bit desensitized to it. There are a lot of tricks with this deck. There's, the Trap Lock is an example where you ping yourself. Knowing what to call for is an experience thing largely. Learning how to mulligan with the deck is super important. And even just other stuff, like if you have an Ogre Captive, Summoner Druid, play the Ogre Captive, keep your Summoner for activating the Ogre Captive, because sometimes you play Summoner, Ogre Captive, going, alright, we're going to get some speed going here, and then they kill your Summoner, and then you can't attack. Because you only have 3 mana, and unless you have Brother in Arms, well, you're not activating that Ogre Captive that turn, so it buys them an extra turn. So stuff like that, just small tricks, stuff like that. The example I gave earlier was against Selena. Against Wisdom Dominion, hold a 4/4 in hand. Or hold a call. Holding call against Wisdom Dominion is amazing, because if they play Selena, you call for Deathtrap and Primal Battle. If they play Guardian, you Unicorn. And in both situations, you're vastly far ahead now. Against Selena, it's actually better for you, but you need the Primal Battle for that. Against Guardian, they're going to kill, what, a 2-mana creature? Almost everything in this deck is 2 mana. So they're going to kill a 2-mana creature. They discarded a card. They might have drawn a card. It's unlikely. They might have drawn 2 cards, but it's actually unlikely against this deck. So they probably went down 2 cards to kill something, and then you Unicorn. So you're down 1 card, and you're down 1 card. They're down 2 cards, and they're probably down a mana as well, and a level. So, just to give you an idea of how bad Guardian is against a Call in hand. Well, I guess if you play the Call, you're actually down 3 mana. But if you've got Call in hand, that deals with both Wisdom Dominion threats on curve. So, just to give you an idea of some of the tricks you can actually do with this deck, I would encourage you, if you're planning on trying this out, I would encourage you to stick with it and try and learn some of the tricks. Analyze what you could have done in games, because there are situations when it's not as straightforward, but I can verify that it's an extremely, extremely powerful build currently, both in ladder setting and conquest. But anyway, that's my, well, half an hour deck tech on NR. I have a lot to talk about when it comes to NR. If you have any questions, either get hold of me on Discord or put it in the comment section below. If you have any deck techs you want to see, especially since it's almost Masters. Masters is next week. So if you want me to cover any decks for Masters or Ladder, the end of Ladder, then go ahead and ask me. I have quite a few decks stacked up right now, which I'm kind of debating. There's like Rage Order is really good. There's RC, there's Blue Soldiers, though I did 2 Soldiers decks already, so I'm like, and there's also a couple other builds floating around. But anyway, thank you for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, put it in the comment section below. But as for now, it's been Jotto, signing off.